welcome to today's webinar on dissertation research. We'll be talking about tips and strategies for doing your literature review and your dissertation. So, oh, excuse me. I just had something in my throat. So let me introduce myself. My name is Faye Callista, and I'm the um, Instruction and Student Outreach Librarian here at the Chicago School. I am based here in Chicago. So welcome, everyone. So a couple things before we begin. If you have any questions at any point, you're more than welcome to raise your hand. Everyone is muted at this point, so I cannot hear you, but if you raise your hand, I can unmute you, and then you can ask your question whether you are on the phone or using a headset, either way. But if you prefer, you can also type your question as well. I'll sort of monitor the questions as they come in during the webinar. But of course, I'll leave time at the end as well for questions if you'd rather just wait until then. Either way is fine. This webinar is being recorded and it will be emailed to you. You'll notice too that in the handouts, I've got two handouts for you today. I've got a PowerPoint and then I also have a literature review spreadsheet if you want to use that. You can download those both from handouts. All right. All right, so today what we'll cover is, first of all, we'll review the components of an effective literature review. We'll look at the steps of researching for your dissertation or prospectus, if that's where you are at. We'll also look at how do you know when you're done. We'll look at tools for how you can organize your search or research. And then finally, where help is available. All right. So just to begin with, just to kind of go over very quickly, I mean, maybe you've already covered this in your classes, but I thought it's would be helpful to sort of review what makes a literature review or what is a literature review. So the way that I think about it is, in a nutshell, it's a comprehensive and up-to-date overview of your research topic, right? And it does help form the intellectual framework for your study, right? Um, It does not need to be exhaustive. So a lot of, students when they first approach this, sometimes you get overwhelmed with the amount of research out there. And really you don't necessarily, I mean, you want to see kind of the lay of the land, so to speak, and see what research is out there. But the review doesn't need to be listing or doesn't need to list every single relevant article, right? Really what it should do is it should contain sort of the most pertinent studies or the most important past and current research and practices in the field. And we'll talk a little bit more later on in this webinar about how do you know what is important past or current research? I mean, how do you sort of evaluate the resources as you find them? All right. So an effective literature review should analyze and synthesize material, right? So it's not just about listing or just talking about, oh, what's the research out there, right? So analysis or synthesizing the information may include, for example, comparing and contrasting different views on an issue, right? So looking at where there might be agreement or disagreement on a particular issue. You might want to look at aspects of methodology. So for example, maybe earlier studies maybe used a small sample size. Maybe there's some other aspect of methodology that you can look at. Definitely want to highlight exemplary studies. So again, we'll kind of look at how do you know what's an exemplary study? You definitely want to identify patterns or trends in the literature. So how does it, change, or how has it changed over time? how has the focus changed or the sort of research areas or direction changed over time? You definitely want to highlight any gaps in or omissions in previous research. So, I mean, oftentimes this is where your dissertation comes in to a certain extent. What questions are left unanswered? Um, you want to show how your study relates to previous studies and also show how your study relates to the literature in general, particularly if there aren't a lot of studies previously that are, um, you know, related to your topic. You kind of want to look at where does this kind of lay in the sort of general topic area or literature. And finally, you want to conclude by summarizing what the literature says. So that's kind of like the sort of overview, right, of what an effective literature review should do. Um, so now that we've got that, we've got these steps in the research process, right? And I've kind of outlined it in 5 different steps, but obviously this isn't kind of an oversimplification, right? I mean, this kind of assumes that you've already sort of like come up with a topic, right? And you've already done the research in order to even come up with a topic, right? Because even coming up with a topic involves research. So we've kind of assumed here that you've already sort of done that to a certain degree. And even if you haven't, this does apply to a certain extent. So the first step is to identify what are your key terms, right? Because that's what you're going to use then to locate literature. And part of locating literature is also knowing kind of where to look, right? So where do you do your research? Where are the best places to do your research? And then as you're doing that, you're also sort of evaluating and selecting what you're going to use for your dissertation or what's going to be included in your literature review. And then as you're doing that, you're also organizing it, right? So what are you doing with that literature once you've found it, once you've evaluated and selected it? Um, and then finally, of course, once you've kind of got that, you're also writing. And I put these arrows in between the different steps because this sort of illustrates that this process is not linear, right? So oftentimes it's a little bit of a kind of a curvy path sometimes to the final product, which means that, even as we're locating literature and evaluating literature, depending on what we find, we might kind of go back and maybe tweak our topic even a little bit. And then that involves identifying more key terms or different key terms. Sometimes when we talk to our chair or dissertation chair, so it's a process. Um, and so it's not always linear. All right. So the first step, of course, is once you've sort of developed your topic, you want to choose the keywords, right? And oftentimes there are multiple ways, as you know, to sort of define a topic. So usually what I find really helpful is even before you sort of start your research is to pick out the key concepts, right, from your research question. And then you take those key concepts and you think of or brainstorm all of the different keywords that are related to those key concepts. So I have an example here. If we were doing a study on like our children who play video games more likely to be violent, we pick out those key concepts, right? So children, video games, violent. You take them directly out of your question. Usually it's going to be between 2 to 4 concepts, right? Any more than that and it starts getting a little too specific or too narrow. And obviously, 2 is going to be pretty broad. So usually it's going to be 3 to 4. So for each key concept, of course, then you think about like, well, what are some other ways that we can sort of talk about this term? So with children, we can also call them kids or youth or child. With video games, we can also talk about electronic games, computer games, gaming. Violence can also be described as aggression or antisocial behavior, violence, etc. All right, so that's kind of how you start. So brainstorming different keywords. Once you kind of are, start building that keyword list for your topic, um, you're going to probably find more as you do research. I find that if you're not sure what search terms to use, or if you don't feel like you've sort of come across all of the different search terms, you can also try using subject terms. So most databases include subject terms in what they call a thesaurus, right? And the thesaurus can be really helpful because it shows the relationships between synonymous or related terms. So broader terms, narrower terms, related terms. Um, and the subject terms found in the thesaurus is just another tool that you have, right, in your search. It can help your search become more precise or be more precise. But keywords are great too. I'm not, sort of saying subject terms are better than keywords, but I would definitely try to use both. All right. You can also find them in the articles as you do your research. So, once you find a few articles that are relevant to your topic, go ahead and look at the indexing or the details for that particular article. It's always listed in most of the databases. If you go to any ProQuest database, EBSCO database, and so forth, it'll list the keywords or the subjects associated with that particular article. And that's another way that you can sort of build your keyword list. There might be some keywords in there that maybe you didn't think of using in your search. You can also look at the abstract for the same reason. And we can take a look at this in a live search as well. So just a moment. All right, and you can also limit your search by subject terms once you've sort of done a search as well. So this can be really helpful. And let me kind of show you what all of that looks like in an actual database. So I'm going to actually pause my PowerPoint here for a second. And let's go into the library and I can show you what that looks like. So I'm not going to use the SWOT search because that doesn't have any of those features that I just talked about. It's going to be in our databases here. And you'll choose a database. Maybe you already have a list of databases that are related to your topic. If not, you can use this to find one. So for example, if I were in psychology, you can click on psychology, click articles, if that's what I'm looking for. Then it gives me sort of the top or recommended databases. The number one database in psychology is definitely going to be PsycInfo. So let's just take a look at that as an example. But all of the databases have these same features. So whether you're looking at PsycInfo or another database, it's all going to be very similar. So first of all, just wanted to point out that thesaurus, how that looks. So for example, if I wanted to look for something about resiliency, right? Resilience, just type that in. All right, so it looks like it is a subject term here. So I can actually check mark that and search that as a subject. But I can also click on this little note here to see any related terms or narrower terms, broader terms. So it looks like there's some related terms here, and I could actually add these to my search as well. So maybe I want to look at resilience, but in particular, maybe coping behavior or emotional adjustment or any of these other ones. You can add those to your search. All right. And then if you start out your search somewhat broader, so maybe I want to look at resilience and then, I don't know, some aspect of maybe COVID-19 or pandemics, click search. Oh, only 5 results. Maybe I'll put pandemic, see if anything more comes up. All right, so a few more. All right, so, and then the other sort of feature I wanted to show you too, which we just talked about, was in building that keyword list is to look at any abstract details that list any additional keywords or subject terms that you can then put in your keyword list. So it always lists subjects and keywords. Um, and then the other thing you can do too is if you start out your search somewhat broader. So I don't have too many results here. It's 477. So I mean, I probably want to narrow this down. But one way you can do that as well is by subject. So we can click here under subject, click more. And what that does is it just breaks down those 477 results and it breaks it down by subject. And this is just another way that you can kind of build that keyword list or subject term list, but also kind of see how that area, that subject area breaks down. So what aspects are people sort of researching? Maybe we want to look at young adults or teenagers. Maybe we want to look specifically at a particular population or what surveys or questionnaires are using, so on and so forth. So this is really helpful. I find this really helpful, particularly as I'm still developing my topic or kind of seeing where related areas of research are within this sort of larger. And it's also really helpful for sort of narrowing down a search too. All right. So just wanted to point that out. All right. So that's limiting your search by subject terms. All right. So of course, once you've sort of built your keyword list, you also want to identify, where you're going to search using those keywords. So you want to identify or use any appropriate library databases. I usually like to start out with subject-specific databases. So just what I showed you just a minute ago, going to that database is A through Z and narrowing in on sort of a subject-specific database like PsycInfo for psychology, ABI Inform Global for business or Business Source. And then once I've searched in subject-specific databases, then I may also look at some multidisciplinary databases like ProQuest Central or Academic Search Ultimate. Um, I also may want to look at OneSearch, which is the sort of main search box on the library website. This actually searches across all of our different databases, or almost like 98%, I think, of our library resources. So it's really comprehensive. So I'd also check there. There are some limitations, though, to OneSearch. So it does lack sort of the bells and whistles that you find in some of the other databases. Like, obviously OneSearch doesn't have a thesaurus or subject-specific limiters that you find in databases like PsycInfo and others. And there might be some specific types of information that you don't see in OneSearch, like some data sets are not available or company info, SWOT analyses, or some other specialized types of information are not easily found using OneSearch. You definitely also want to look at dissertation. So we've got a really great dissertation database. It's called the Digital Dissertations and Theses Global Database. You can find that also under the databases A through Z link on the library website. Um, It includes actually 2 million full text dissertations. You can also search for dissertations actually in OneSearch as well, and then limit it to just dissertations. You can also check Google Scholar. I mean, I know a lot of people like using Google Scholar. It's a great resource. I usually don't start my search with Google Scholar, but I do tend to use that after I look at sort of library resources, right? Just because Google Scholar doesn't have, again, a lot of those bells and whistles that I was talking about earlier, like a thesaurus or all those subject-specific limiters. You can also search for books. Sometimes books can be helpful as sort of, I don't know, either for a theoretical background or background information and so forth. All right, so as you're locating literature, it's really important to not restrict your search to full text articles only. When you do a search in one search, for example, it will show you just the full text articles unless you ask it to search beyond the collection. Also in the databases, you'll notice that there are some databases will allow you to limit to full text articles only, which is great if you're writing a paper or your assignment, maybe is due next, this week. Don't necessarily want to see articles that aren't full text, right? You want articles that you can just look at right away. So anyway, and even though our resources are pretty comprehensive, I think, especially for a library our size or for an institution our size, not everything is full text, right? So some journals will embargo the full text for 6 months up to 18 months, so they're not available online. We may not have an online subscription to the publication that you're seeking. So in these cases, you can always use interlibrary loan to obtain any articles that you cannot find full text online. This is particularly important for a literature review or for your dissertation, right? Because you want to point to the most pertinent or important past and current research. And that means everything, right? Not just stuff that's available full text. Interlibrary loan is a really easy service that we have available through the library. It's free. There are no restrictions right now to how many articles you can request. And it's fast. You can get most articles within 24 to 48 hours. So it's really quick. Um, if you're in one search, just make sure that you click on the expand your search option. Uh, so let's say you have a citation in hand for an article that you want and it's not available full text, go ahead and plug that title into one search and then click expand your search. You should be able to find it that way. And then it will provide a link where you can request it or get it from other libraries. All right. So as you're locating literature in the databases or, Google Scholar, whatever, usually with databases, again, you can use those subject-specific limiters in the databases. Um, Another advanced search feature that you can use is combining keywords. So, for example, if you were looking at a specific population, like let's say it was LGBTQ population, you can definitely put, for example, LGBTQ as a keyword, and you will get results. But there are other sort of adjacent terms, right? I mean, so you can combine all of those in a search like this by combining them with the word or. So you could put LGBTQ or gay or lesbian or bisexual or transsexual or queer, right? And then that way you're asking the database to look for any of those words, right? So that can be really helpful. Or with COVID-19, for example, I mean, it's also a pandemic. Some people also call it coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2. So this way, again, you can combine those words, those related terms with the word or in a search. Or you can also see if there's a subject term, right? So for COVID-19, instead of typing out COVID-19 or pandemic or SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus, we could just look it up as a subject term. And then that's just another way that you can search for that. So definitely use any advanced search features as needed. We do have a lot of information too on our website on these features. For example, for truncation, you can use an asterisk if you want to put that next to the root of a word, and then it will search for all the sort of permutations of that particular term. So adolescent with a asterisk will search for adolescent or adolescents or adolescents. Phrase searching is really helpful too. So if there's two words that belong together in that order, you should put quotation marks around it. So social distancing, for example, sort of a term used in the last year or so. If you don't put quotation marks around that term, it's going to look for the word social, and it's going to look for the word distancing, but not necessarily together, right? So by putting quotation marks around it, now you're searching that as a phrase. Question mark, that we also call that wild card. You can use that for any words that have different spellings, right? So women or woman, or maybe a British or versus American English spelling of a word, you can use a wild card. So all of that is available on the library website. I'm going to go back to the library website here so I can show you where that is. All right. So we do have a guide on all of that under Find Help, and then Research Guides, or you can just find it also under Research and then Research Guides. And then we have it here under Research and Writing Support and Guide to Searching. All right. So this has got all of the sort of information here on Boolean searching, additional search options like phrase searching, truncation and wildcards, and so forth. So you can find more information here. All right. So yeah, definitely use advanced search features as needed. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to mention is we're locating literature. It's really helpful to use citation chaining and bibliographic mining. It's also known as pearl growing. You might have heard it described as that, or chain searching or citation mining. And there's two types. There's backwards and forwards citation searching. So the first one, backwards reference searching, is identifying and examining references or works cited in an article, right? And that's done for a couple of reasons. It's to learn about the development of knowledge on a topic. You can study the origins and development of a theory, construct, or model of interest. And then you can also use it to identify experts or institutions or organizations that specialize in a topic of research. And then we've got forward citation searching, and this helps you expand your knowledge on a topic by locating follow-up studies. You can also identify new findings or developments on a topic and examine and consider maybe other methodologies or analyses used to study a topic. So that's really helpful. So what that looks like in a database, for example, like in PsycInfo, what we looked at just now, or any other library database, Google Scholar does this as well. Usually it'll list the cited by and the references under each article. So obviously, if an article has been cited many times, that might be an indication of at least the impact that that particular article has had on that particular topic area. We were talking about sort of locating pertinent past and current research on a topic. That might be something to look at. I mean, just because something's been cited many, 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 many times doesn't necessarily mean that it's for a good reason, but definitely something to look at. So that's especially when you're writing a dissertation or literature review. All right. As you're locating literature, you might also want to look at whether any literature reviews or review articles exist on your topic. You might be lucky and find that there are some, and that can be really helpful when you are writing your own literature review. And some databases even enable you to limit your search to just literature reviews or review articles like PsycInfo. But if your database does not have that option under methodology in the advanced search, you can also just use it as a keyword. So use literature review as a keyword, see what happens. All right. You may also want to create an alert on your topic. As you all know, if you're writing your dissertation, you're not quite done or not really done until you are defending your dissertation. So it's really important to create alert on your topic. That way, any new articles that are added to the database will be sort of forwarded to your email. Could be really helpful. So most databases have this feature. In fact, Google Scholar also includes that feature. OneSearch has this feature. And then, of course, all of the different databases have this as well. And the way that it works is you usually, do, as you're doing your research, once you've sort of come across a really good combination of keywords that really gives you sort of the results that you're looking for. And of course, you can always limit it by date or other, there's lots of different ways that you can limit your search. But once you have it limited in a way that's giving you the results that you're looking for, go ahead and create an alert or on that topic. In ProQuest, for example, usually it's right there on the right-hand side where you can click on Save Search Alert. And it usually gives you some options as far as how often you want your alert to be sent to your email and how long. So for the next 2 months, 6 months, year, you can choose those parameters. All right. Some more things to consider as you're sort of locating literature. It's really helpful to prioritize your search. So you want to sort of look at peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles, right? That should sort of constitute the bulk of your sort of literature review or the sort of what you're referencing. But you can also look at, non-refereed or non-scholarly articles, books, conference papers, dissertations. You just don't want that to be the bulk, right? You want the most of your resources to be from peer-reviewed or scholarly journals. You definitely want to rely on the most current research. So there's no hard line as far as how far back you can look. I mean, you definitely want to look at sort of the most recent research, so maybe 5, 10 years, depending on your topic. But it doesn't mean that you can't comment on any classic works on your topic as well. So if there was a really important research study that was done maybe 15 years ago, and is still cited and still referenced to this day, has relevance to your topic, it's fine to include that in your literature review, just as long as your literature review is not full of really old research, right? Again, you want most of your research to be recent. And, the more you research, generally you kind of get a sense for that, right? And then, of course, rely on primary sources. So, you can use secondary sources selectively, but, you want the majority of your sources to be primary. And it's important to note, too, that just because an article is published in a scholarly journal doesn't necessarily mean that it's a primary source or a research article. It could be a review article, which, again, it's fine if you put that in there. But you want to make sure that you are also using primary sources. So a primary source is essentially a original object or document, right? So for most of us in the social sciences, this will be the results of a research study. It could also be statistical data, results of an experiment, or the results of research studies. Usually these will include sections, right, where they talk about the methods they use, the results. There's usually a discussion. You can read an abstract usually to get a good sense for what kind of article you're looking at, right? So here I've got kind of an example of an abstract. And if you skim over it just really quickly, is this a primary source? No, because it looks like this particular article is reviewing previous research. This, on the other hand, you can note very quickly that this is in fact a primary source, right? So this is talking about the results of an actual study that was done. So they talk about their methods, talk about the results, talk about the conclusion or discussion of what those results sort of mean. All right. So the next step, of course, is you're finding literature. You're also evaluating and selecting some strategies you can use. I think sometimes it's helpful to start from new to old or general to specific. So start with a sort of general topic and then sort of lead towards specific areas of interest. And it sort of helps you develop an understanding of sort of the interrelationships of research within that subject area. You want to look at the quality of the journal. So look at the publisher, who's publishing this information? Who are the top, or what are the top journals in your field? And for that matter, who are really the sort of experts in the field, right? So look at the output of the author, sort of institutional affiliation and so forth, past writings or experience. You kind of get a sense for that too as you read and become more informed on your topic. Um, and then, of course, that will sort of prompt you to sort of go back and do more focus searches. So if you find an author, for example, go ahead and do another search, just looking for that particular author and so forth. Or if you find that there are a number of articles published in a particular journal, you may want to look at that as well. Um, it doesn't mean that everything has to be sort of top-notch, like sort of quality in terms of the research, but you also don't want to, keep referencing sort of information that obviously isn't peer-reviewed or vetted or so forth. So yeah, definitely look at that. All right, so one question I get very often from students is, how do you know you're done? Kind of feel like I'm going around in circles. I keep finding like more and more articles and sort of don't know when I'm done. So I have this checklist that you may want to look at. It sort of outlines some of the things that you want to sort of think about. So for example, have you searched in the databases in your subject area or in related subject areas? Have you looked at the top journals in your field and done searches there? Have you looked at Google Scholar? And if you keep finding the same citations over and over again, that's usually a good indication that you've sort of saturated the literature. Have you looked for dissertations related to your topic? That's really key, particularly if they're more recent, right? Have you looked for review articles in your subject area? I mean, of course, if they exist, they may not. You may also want to look at conference papers or white literature, particularly if they're very recent. So what are people researching right now in your particular topic area? Have you used different keywords and subject terms? So have you really, sort of saturated that or built your keyword list? Did you use citation chaining and bibliographic mining? So look at those like articles that have been cited or references. Um, have you created an alert on your topic? And did you make sure that you're not checking the full text box? Also, you want to make sure, have you used interlibrary loan services to obtain items that are not available full text in the library? Are you still finding new sources when changing your keywords or through citation chaining? Because again, if you keep finding the same sort of citations over again, well, that's usually a good indication. And then finally, have you consulted with other researchers in your field, your chair, your librarian? That can also help as well. All right. So we've gone over sort of building your keyword list, going into different databases and other sources to find articles, talked a little bit about evaluating those sources as we find them. We also want to then organize literature. So lots of people use citation managers to organize your literature. So it's sort of like a personal database of your references, right? And there's lots of tools out there available. Um, the library subscribes to RefWorks, which is available under my accounts and on the library website. But there's other ones out there as well. There's Zotero, Mendeley, EndNote, and it's really a personal sort of preference, right? I'm not going to necessarily recommend any particular citation managers. I think they all, sort of do a lot of the same things, right? They all sort of create bibliographies using APA or any other format or citation style. You can export references from article databases into your citation manager. You can generate in-text citations and bibliography as you write. All of these tools provide that capability. And in fact, generating in-text citations and bibliographies is probably one of the most useful features of these tools. So you can use them with your word processor, which is really fantastic. And if you want, I can even recommend, we probably in November will have a webinar on citation managers. You want to keep an eye out for that one. But anyway, huge time saver in terms of organizing your literature. So definitely look into that. There's also even individual databases have accounts that are available. They're free. It just takes usually a minute just to create these accounts, either in ProQuest or in EBSCO. And they also allow you to save articles, save searches, manage your alerts, organize your research into different folders and so forth. And ProQuest even allows you to synchronize your account with RefWorks. So anything that you save in ProQuest in your My Research folder also gets saved automatically to RefWorks. So that's kind of a nice feature. All right. Another thing you can do too, some people find it really helpful to maintain a spreadsheet to kind of add notes on different aspects of each item that they find. So you put the citation, kind of the general topic or subject area, maybe you want to like note the theoretical perspective or conceptual framework for that particular article, maybe note the methodology, annotate, maybe even add quotations that you may want to use in your dissertation. Some people also use citation managers in a similar way, right? So, I mean, you can put it in a spreadsheet. Most citation managers like EndNote or RefWorks have ways that you can add notes, right? So you can add a note about methodology or, um, you know, theoretical perspective and so forth. And some citation managers might do it better than others. I think probably the paid version or the non-free version of EndNote is really good for that. But on the other hand, too, it's kind of a steeper learning curve. So definitely play around with these, kind of see what works for you. As I said, it's kind of a personal preference. I did add that spreadsheet in the handouts area if you want to download it. So just a spreadsheet to keep track of your research. All right, so once you've done that, you may be ready to start writing. Lots of resources available to you in terms of writing your literature review or your dissertation. We've got our Writing Center services available. You can make an appointment with our tutors. We've also got webinars on writing a literature review, so we can look at the workshops coming up on that topic. You can also check out resources in the library. We have plenty actually of books on writing dissertations, doing research, and so forth. So I just put a couple examples here, but there are lots of other ones that you can find. And probably the easiest way to find these is just doing a search in OneSearch on the library website. All right. So I know I just, sort of gave you a lot of information here, but if you leave this webinar with one piece of information, it would be this. Help is available. So you can set up an appointment with a librarian. We can go over really any aspect of the research process. One of the most common research consultations that we do get with students is for dissertation research. So oftentimes we have students who have questions about, I mean, really anything from like narrowing down their topic to, hey, I'm not finding enough articles on this particular topic. Can you help out? Maybe I don't have the right keywords or research strategy. So we do help a lot with that, sort of coming up with a research strategy that will give you the results that you're looking for. Um, but it can also be even like, I am pretty much done with my literature review. I think I got everything, but I'm not sure if this is comprehensive enough. Can you take a look at it? Sometimes I feel like I'm going around in circles. Yeah, or it could be, hey, I need an instrument for my dissertation. I'm having a hard time finding one. Can you help me with that? So lots of different, we get lots of different questions and we're more than happy to help. So you can find us under, the find help and then meet with a librarian and set an appointment. It's so easy. We use Zoom and screen sharing. So, and you can set an appointment from half an hour up to a full hour. So definitely encourage you to take advantage of that service. And I'll be honest, it's one of my favorite parts of my job. So, don't feel shy. All right, at this point, does anybody have any questions? I know I can do any sort of live demonstrations of any of the tools and research strategies that I outlined here in the session. Or if you have specific questions, now is the time to ask. And you can either raise your hand or type your question. All right, well, it doesn't look like we have any questions. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes in case anyone has any questions, but otherwise, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar. And as I said, like we're here if you have any questions or want to set up a research consultation, we're more than happy to help. All right, have a great night, everyone. Thanks.